Welcome. Here we are with our third and final session of our Men's Ministries online forum. We certainly hope that these have been a help and a blessing to you. If this is the first one of these that you're seeing, I highly encourage you to go back and pick up the first two sessions either on Facebook or on YouTube. I believe you'll certainly find them to be worth your time. Whenever we put these forums together, my favorite format is always when we can gather a number of men into a discussion on a particular topic. There's just something about that iron sharpening iron as guys get real and talk with one another without a script. I find it refreshing. And tonight, that's what we have for you. Our subject is what I wish I knew in growing into a man. I invited 4 leaders to talk with me. I just threw a few questions at them concerning this topic and they took it from there. I've been blessed by this, and I think you will too. Here we go. And welcome everybody to our third session of our Men's Ministries online forum. We're glad to have a good group of guys with us tonight that are going to be discussing the topic of what it means to grow into being a man, or what I wish I knew in growing up to be a man. And so the men you see in front of you, I'm happy to have along with me tonight for this discussion. Let me give a few brief introductions before we jump in. We have with us Brother Kevin Tenpenny. It says he is the husband of a beautiful and brilliant godly woman, has 4 sons, 2 adults, 2 of them are school aged, and last fall he became the grandfather of 2 twin girls. He attends the Herrick Church, where he volunteers in several areas, including prison ministry and in men's ministry. And a few years ago in 2018, the Lord led him to retire from being a college professor and to instead start a full-time family's business. And he sees Jesus' example of discipleship through relationship as part of our highest calling in the church. And we're glad to have Kevin on board with us tonight. Pastor Les Cotton serves as senior pastor at Apostolic Life Church in Urbana, Illinois, where they also host the ministry of Lifeline Connect, a men's residential recovery center. He's married to his wife, Emily. Together, they have 3 children, Brecklin, Denver, and Lawson. And he loves spending time outdoors with his family. Then we have Pastor Judah Donaldson. He serves as executive pastor at the Pentecostal Church of Second Chances in Marshall, Illinois. And Judah is actually bivocational. He also works as a nursing manager for our 2 hospital departments at Horizon Health in Paris. He married his high school sweetheart 10 years ago. They have 2 children together, Tucker and Elsie, and another little boy on the way. His greatest goal in life is to make it to heaven. And he says, of course, he wants to take just as many people with him as he can. And we're also happy to have Pastor Roy Upchurch with us tonight. He has been married for over 50 years. How commendable is that? Together they have 3 children, 8 grandchildren. He just recently, in the last few years, retired as pastor at Effingham, has also served this district so well as presbyter, and was actually the very first director of Illinois Men's Ministries. And so we owe a great debt to him. But he says he's always tried to make himself available to the Lord, whether it was in ministry or running electrical lines at the camp or just anything that needs done. And we certainly appreciate his involvement and all the help that he's been to our churches. So that is our panel tonight, and we are happy to have them on board. As I mentioned, our topic is what I wish I knew in growing into being a man. And we're going to jump right in, and I'll just kind of pitch the question out, and whichever of you guys want to start, it's just great. We'll start with this idea of what does this mean in growing into being a man? Is that a certain age? Is that a certain event at which, okay, now I'm a man? Or is that some kind of process? And if so, what does that look like? What does that mean, this, as we talk about growing into being a man? Someone want to jump in with that?
Sure. I think that there's a misconception between what the world's view of manhood is and what the church's view of manhood is, and they're very, very different. In the world's eye, sometimes it's an age, sometimes it's becoming a father, sometimes it's a specific place in your life that you've arrived. So it's maybe a career or it's an education market, something like that. That's what the world views. And with certain activities, we look at people as becoming a man, or maybe they should have become a man through those activities. But we see very easily that those don't make us men, because there are many fathers who are not responsible men. There are many husbands that are not responsible men. There are many people who have done all of these things, but never acquired manhood or become that man. But in God's eyes, being a man is being able to, as scripture says, walk not in the counsel of the ungodly. Being a man scripturally or according to the will of God is following the purpose and plan that God has for you. So it's not a specific age, I don't believe, because again, the call of God happened with many people in the Word of God at very, very young ages. So it's not specifically an age, I don't believe. I think it's that when we're following the will of God, we're doing the purpose of God. And I think that in a church's eye or in God's eye is kind of what leads us towards manhood.
I think whenever I think about a man, I had mentioned one time before that the first man was created a man, and all the rest of us had to become a man.
Right.
The first two men that we find out in the Bible was Cain and Abel, and it seemed like Abel was able to become a man, and Cain got stuck in the boyhood way with his attitudes and things.
Mm-hmm.
Also, when we look at when God came to manifest himself unto us in flesh, he came and became a man. And some of the things that he done would not fit in what we would think is what it was to become a man, but he was our perfect example about what a man should really be. And that's what we want to follow after, I think. And I think it's a lifelong process of becoming a man.
Absolutely. All of us on here are fathers. What kind of things are you or did you point your boys toward in this idea of growing into a man? What, as you were raising them, helping to grow them up, what were you trying to show them or get them engaged in or do as you're kind of growing them into men?
I can go. I'm in a very early process of this with my son, Denver, who is only 3 years old. But one thing that I want to be super intentional about instilling in him is my love for him and how it is unconditional. And there's nothing that's going to separate us from our love for one another, because I want him to experience the love of Christ through me as I'm his hands and his feet. If he has a good perspective of a healthy identity of an earthly father, then I'm going to set him up to have that connection to be able to receive the love on a vertical level from his heavenly father. So I'm very intentional about just telling him, hey, Denver, I want you to know that I love you this much. And I love you because of you're my son, not because of what you do, but because of who you are. Right. And he's getting it. I don't know how much he comprehends, but my Sunday school teacher told me the other day that she had Denver in class, and she just said, my dad loves me this much because I'm his son. And so that just, reaffirmed to me that, what, he is getting it, that he is not what he does, but it's who he is. So it's that, it's that validation of that identity is something that I'm super intentional about a young child between 3 to 5 years old, because that's when children develop most of their belief systems, the way they give and receive love, the way they perceive the world. So I want it to be a safe place, and I want them to know the Father's love as he experiences it through me.
Well, unless that's such a crazy cool point, because it translates, as you said, to spiritual things, because we find in the church a lot of people that struggle receiving the love of God a lot of times have struggled in previous times with the love of a father or a parent.
Right.
Because in our world, again, I keep going back to it, we have such contrasting views between the church and the world. But in the world, a father or a mother loves you if you're good in school, or you're great in sports, or you do this well, you do that well. We learn how to be our performance. And when we perform well, then people love us more. And then we bring that, when we come to God, we bring that into the church, and we're like, if I sin, or if I do this, or if I fail, then God loves me less. And it's not scriptural. It's not true. God's love for us is ever the same. It's never changing, regardless of how we perform, because he knew we were going to fail. He knows that we're fallible and that we're human and that we make errors. But he also knows that his perfect love is there for us when we fail. So I think as a father, to Les's point, I'm also a father of a young boy. Tucker's only 6, but I think in that, showing him that when he fails, I love him the same as when he succeeds. And when he's good at something, I love him the same as when he's not good at something. And that kind of translates into the love of God for him, that regardless of who you are, what your name is, or what you've been, God loves you the same.
Yeah. The other thing that I want to be intentional about too is practicing presence, because, we can do so well in performing in things that we're very comfortable with. So, we can knock it out of the park when it comes to our job, but in areas that we're not with, in the unknown, we can tend to be passive, or we can tend to give, as men, everything that we have to the workplace. And when we come home, we lose sight of really, why were we going to work? It was to have this home. It was to have this family. It was to have connection with the people that I love. And I give everything at the workforce, and I have nothing left to give my children. So it's not, necessarily providing them presence and experiences and opportunities, but it's practicing presence of, them, just us having the gift of each other, and, creating that bond and that relationship to where they can continue to grow and to mature and to be able to walk in that purpose.
Yeah, I think it's really some of the same things that are being said, that it's instilling attitudes and, relationship with God, of course, we're made in the image of God. So, they have to know that's a key part of their identity. And we have to model that too. We can't just lecture everything into them, or parenting might be easy, but just showing them the attitudes that a man has to take. And, I try to tell not just my sons, but young men that I may interact with is, I want to try to treat you as a man. You may not ultimately be held responsible as a man yet, but there's not that one day. I think probably most of us agree that there's not a date and a time appointed. And,
Sure.
Like it was already said, now you've crossed the finish line. But it's just, the responsibility as a man of taking responsibility for others, and being the initiator, taking an active role in caring for others, serving others, leading others, being involved in decisions and not just passing those things along. And even if they're too young to be involved in some of the decisions, I've had a couple of different ages of sons already, but getting involved and telling them a little bit, hey, here's what we looked at, and just modeling. We train players, we train athletes, we train employees, and the Bible definitely points us towards we've got to train up a child, but train up a man the way he should go.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And so we're talking tonight about what I wish I knew as I was growing into a man. And we've already started to kind of bring a few things to the surface along those lines. And as we're talking about, like, being a man is it's partially like there's some naturally occurring things as you bring up, Judah, the physical attributes and so on. I mean, with just, a little bit of nourishment and day by day. And a boy is going to grow taller. His voice is going to deepen and so on and so forth. And we've recognized that, but there's also, he's really going to develop the spiritual and emotional attributes of a man by seeing it modeled often enough in the presence of other men. What are some common gaps, though? Maybe some common areas to where it's easy for a guy to miss this part, or it's easy for that to be hurried past, and we're looking at a number of grown boys and maybe men in 80% of life, but there's something I've missed here and here. Anything come to mind that in the men you've been around, the boys you've raised? Les, I know you're heavily involved in ministry with regard to helping men recover and get back on their feet and so on and so forth. Have you guys seen some particular instances where again and again it seems like there's a gap here or this gets missed?
Yeah, and I think it's across the board for all men. It's the question that we all need to answer: am I enough?
Mhm.
And I think that is part of the process of having the church and having other godly men that you surround yourself with, to be able to invest in those to help them answer that question in a very safe way, so they can, have failures, but learn how to learn from those experiences, how to get back up again, to realize that that is not their entire value and identity in their life, to where they can continue on, they can experience success, to where they can check those boxes, as they progress through life. And those will continue to happen, even like in my life now with transitioning into, young children. It's transitioning to another part of being a man, for being responsible not only for your wife, but, for others. And so, I lean on people who have a lot more experience than me. And there's times where I fail, but like Judah said, you're honest, you're open, you're transparent. Your kids can respect that. They can relate to that because they know what it's like to make mistakes, and create a safe place to where they can, fall and get back up and keep going on and
I
get
think
those.
so. Like, to his point, I think if we create a punitive response to failure every
Mhm.
time, failure will be hidden and failure will be
Right.
internalized rather
Mhm.
than talked about and open. To Les's point, if
Mhm.
if your child feels comfortable coming to you and be like, Dad, I really messed this up and I just want you to help me. I need your help. I want you to pray with me. How awesome would that be, that you could be that connection versus a child isolating because they're ashamed? And,
Mhm.
as adults, we do that too. But I think, probably to maybe contrast a little bit from what Les said with that, I think one thing that I see over and over and over is a lot of times our fathers don't teach our young men through example how to be spiritual. Um, Sadly, in the church, mothers carry most of the weight of being spiritual in our homes. And
Mhm.
that's so tragic, but it's everywhere.
So we talked about the gaps of that spiritual element. It's easy to think of manhood as macho or as physical or whatever, and often we miss a spiritual. Let's brought up the kind of gap of that, answering that "Am I enough?" question, which is so prevalent as well. Anything else come to mind as far as just kind of major gaps that we see repeated again and again, that too many of our men just don't get as they're growing into this?
I think some of the challenges in this day, which with my father and me, we had times together, fishing, hunting, whatever it might be.
Mhm.
But in this day and age, it seems like the screen and the computer and the games and all the video has kind of eroded in that. And I think of this future generation, that's going to be a challenge for the fathers, because it's so much easier to just go on and do your thing and let the son or the daughter or whoever it is that you're trying to influence go on and do their thing. And
Right.
that's a challenge that's I see in the future. It
Mhm.
started as our children were growing up, but it's become more prevalent even today. And it's one of those things I think that you just have to intentionally fill in and make sure that it don't take over.
And along those lines, I think for for both the elder, the father, or the father figure, as well as the younger, we've got to process in time. I'm a teacher, and so what I want to do is develop a lesson that in 30 minutes, here's your 3 points that if you'll take these, everything will be great. But the fact is, growing into being a man is not a microwave kind of thing. It's a slow cooker kind of deal. And so, like Brother Upchurch mentions, the hunting and the fishing, or what have you. As I look back on my life, um, some of the biggest moments, or maybe even they weren't particular moments, but some of the biggest areas of growth in becoming a man for me was not because I had the 1 or 2 points right, or I got this one word of wisdom. I look back and it's spending that time. It's riding around in a truck with man. It's being engaged with my father, or father in the gospel, or other godly men in my life, just at times with no particular agenda, but just spending that time, and as you kind of do life together, and we use that cliche way too much probably, but as we just kind of experience things together, you get to see and learn and appreciate, and that begins to rub off on you. And I agree, we're in danger of losing a lot of that with all of our tech and our screens and everyone kind of isolating even while all around. We sometimes say, if I knew then what I know now, how different things could be. Looking back on perhaps your own life, are there some things that you see that you could go back now with the wisdom you have, or the insight or the growth that you've experienced, and do differently? Or maybe what would you say to your younger self if you could rewind the clock as you were growing into a man?
I think probably, since I'm the oldest one here, I would say, let the Lord lead and guide and direct your life. And then you don't have to worry about a lot of the major decisions that's to come along.
Yes, sir.
I realized that through my becoming a man, there was things that I worried about, that I fretted over. How's this going to work out? What's this going to do? But I've tried to encourage young men and young people and even young adults, just give your life to God, love him with all your heart, ask him to guide and direct your life, and he'll do it. And I thought of all the needless things that I worried about as a young man. I should have just been enjoying the journey.
Okay, good.
That's
I would say probably, if I could go back and tell me one thing to kind of alter or change where I am now, it'd be to realize whose opinion actually matters. And I think that as young men, we look at, as a 16-year-old, 15, 16, 17-year-old, who we believe their voice or their opinion to matter is very different than where I'm at now, or where any of us are right now. Because at that young age, we look at people of influence, and we, who we identify as those people of influence, whether it be a sports figure or anyone with a platform, anyone with a microphone, anybody that we find on social media, anybody that has an opinion that resonates with our own, that validates what we already think or validates what we feel. Those are the ones that we commonly follow at a young age. And I did that. I think it's common. But now looking back, I can see that the opinions that mattered were the ones that were challenging and hard and difficult and in opposition to what I wanted. And most of those came from my father. And I now look back, and both my father, my mother, other ministers, and other people in the church that would speak into my life, counseling and leadership and guidance, those were the ones that they always bothered me. And I never agreed with them in the time, because they were, like I said, they were in opposition to what I wanted, but they were in direct parallel to what God wanted for me. So I think looking back now, if I could have changed who I thought was right.
I certainly look back and, I'm thankful for where the Lord has brought me, but wish that I would have realized much younger that how necessary it is to put God first. And I think there's a characteristic in all people, men or women, but definitely I barely understand the part about the men, but that we have this tendency to put ourselves first. Here's what I would like to accomplish. Here's what I want to be. Here's the things I want to do, and some adventures I would like to experience. And to realize that if I will put God first, oftentimes he will put others' needs next. And I can avoid that pitfall of serving myself before others. And there's a lot of different ways that really can lead us down the wrong path, but it just encouraging, younger men, older boys, children of all ages, and you put God first, after that, naturally, he will help you see others next. And in a way that's not just about, self-denial or self-martyring, but in a way that serves and loves others. And that's true strength. Men, we need strong men. And, but that strength is the same kind of strength that it took for Jesus to stay on the cross when he had the ability to serve himself. And, that's just something that I wish I knew, something that I've told my older sons as they kind of transitioned into different points went into what most people consider adulthood is, don't be hung up about always making the right choice. And, I mean that with some context. I want them to make the right choice. They need to pursue right things, but that ultimately we're going to make the wrong choice at times, and to be willing to examine our choices, let God, help us, give us wisdom to see the error of our ways and to learn, to correct the course and not just stick with it, just to prove that we can stick with a good decision or bad decision, but to recognize. And, a lot of times I'll pray, Lord, this is what I'm going to do. This is the best I understand so far of your will. So I'm just going to take a step or two, and please throw up the red stop sign, red light as soon as possible, so I can recognize when to correct my path or to recalibrate.
Yes, sir.
I've had a lot of time to think about this question because, at 27 years old, my life was completely destroyed by a prescription pain pill addiction. So I've pondered this of, if I could go back in time and tell myself a few things, what would they be? And especially looking back now, almost being 40 years old and experiencing a little more life, the first thing I would tell myself is Matthew 6:33. That became my life verse at 27 years old. When I came to a place of complete brokenness and destruction in my life, I made up my mind that I would seek him first in his kingdom, and that everything else would just come together if I would put him first. Everything else that I was worried about, God already had it on the back burner. He just wanted my heart. He wanted relationship. He wanted me to walk and talk with him and be with him. And keep that number one in your life, Matthew 6:33. And the other thing is, you will not get to where you need to go unless you have God and others. It's impossible. We're talking about becoming a man is a process. And you may not have had that father figure in your life, but God will send men into your life. He'll send the church. That's the beautiful thing about the body of elders, of men that can speak into your life, who have been there, who have climbed that mountain, and will go back and say, hey, let me show you the way. This is how you do this. And you can glean from their experience. You're not going to have it all figured out on your own. At 18, 19 years old, I thought I was invincible. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. I was going to do everything my own way and learn through my experience. But now looking back is, you need others, Les. You need men of God to speak into your life. You need to surround yourself with godly counsel, with good people that are men of God. And, that's going to get you to the place that you need to be.
Yes. How awesome
is that? The proverb that I think that stands out above all of them is, it says, trust in the Lord with all thine heart, lean not to thine own understanding, in all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy path. It is so important to know that's what God will do. And his word's been true. It's been proven by many, many people. And that's the advice that I would give myself again.
Yes, sir. And I think as I look back and I think, what would I say to a 15-year-old or 18-year-old or 20-year-old me? I think for me, it would have to be something along the lines of hey, nobody else has it figured out either. Nobody else has got this worked out just right either. And I think at times, and some of you guys have already touched on this, there's this struggle of, I'm supposed to know it all, and I'm supposed to have it all together. And, I'm supposed to have done all this right and figured this all out at the first look at it. And I think if I was going back in time, I would tell myself, hey, look, relax. Nobody else has got this all together either. yes, try, work, do what you need to do, but there's no need for pretending in the meantime. It's that question of am I enough that Les brought up, that hey, it is okay because you are enough and God does love you and you have what it takes. Now you're going to fall down and make a mess of some things sometimes, and that's kind of part of the process, but relax. Everybody else has fallen down and made a mess too. It's part of it's part of being a man. It's part of the human condition. And I think that's what I would share with my younger self.
I think that like causes the isolation that Les was talking about, is this fake belief that everybody else has it going perfectly. You know, we go to a restaurant, we look and we're like, oh, well, they have a perfect marriage and their kids never act up and they have their finances in order and this person's whatever. But you know, and I'm sure Les with young kids can understand, there's sometimes we'll go to a restaurant or we'll be in public and my kids are acting like complete crazy people. I don't even know what's wrong with them. And then another family's kids will do the same thing. It's like all sets of the parents like lock eyes and we're like, we get it. Like,
Right.
Thank you for being who you are, because you made me feel normal tonight.
Right.
Well, guys, as we kind of bring this to a close, I'd ask you this last question, which is thinking of, you know, a young man maybe who has just graduated high school in the last few weeks, or the young man who's getting married this summer, or is otherwise kind of walking through those processes, walking through that time of say late teenage years, maybe they're in their early 20s. What is a next step or two that you would suggest to that guy on this journey of growing into a man? What's one, two things that you would point him toward or point him to focus on in growing into being a man?
I think if we could just tell him it is going to be a struggle, the making of you becoming a man. There's going to be victories, there's going to be defeats, there's going to be joys, there's going to be sorrows. It's all part of the process. You know, the Apostle Paul said, for our light affliction, which is but for a moment, it worketh for us. Now we think it works against us, but the Bible said it's working for us an exceeding eternal weight of glory. And so if there's anything I could tell him, is when you run into opposition, when you run into problems, you just keep believing God, trust in him, and he'll make you the man you ought to be.
I would say enjoy the journey. Because I'm saying that because I absolutely stink at it and I'm still struggling and I'm still working on it. I'm an avid planner. I love to plan every minute of every day for the rest of my life. I'm fairly certain I know exactly like when I'm going to die and when Jesus is going to take me home. But my mom actually was probably around the time that she was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. She was determining what she was going to do with treatments, and our whole family was shook by this, and just you know, our whole world was turned upside down. And she over and over would say to me constantly, enjoy the journey, slow down and enjoy the journey. And what that means to me is, instead of looking at the 1 year, the 5 year, the 10-year plan for this young person who's getting ready to go to college, getting ready to get married, getting ready to have a baby, enjoy today and look at today as I have all day today to be who I need to be.
Yeah, I would say, you know, every area of your life that you have goals or aspirations in, or curiosities or hopes, you know, find a guide, find an elder, find a mentor. You know, occasionally in a profession or something, they can be outside the church, but as much as possible, find someone that with spiritual maturity that not only give you practical guidance, but also spiritual guidance, because we know a lot of times that we're trying to make a practical decision, but really, you know, as it's been said, if we just seek God first, a lot of times there's something really spiritual at work inside of us that needs to be in place before the practical can happen. You know, we're supposed to make disciples, but we're also supposed to be disciples. And we always need the leadership and the teaching of those that have more experience. And not just the spiritual side, but, find someone that can give you some practical guidance about planning for the future, financially. Yeah, I think keep that in mind. What Brother Judah said too: enjoy it still. Don't get all hung up in the planning part. But find a guide, find a mentor, find an elder, or more than one, really.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I agree with Kevin as well. You've got at that age, you need to have some type of plan. I think Judah's the exception to the rule of being the ultra planner and having every detail out. I see a lot of people, they have way more plans and details for a vacation than they do for their life. They just kind of just exist and go to work and go to church. And this is just, and life just kind of happens. And, it's kind of like shooting an arrow and you have no target. You don't know what you're hitting. At that age, I want to have a target. I want to know, what does transition look like? What is my purpose that God has for me in life? And like Brother Kevin said, surround myself with people who have been there, of elders, to help me get there and accomplish those things. Short-term goals, long-term goals.
Absolutely.
Well, men, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for sharing with us. And we trust that this is going to be helping other men along the journey. In some cases, young men, in some cases, older men. Because I think we would all agree that while I'm so glad I'm not who I was 20 years ago, I'm not there yet. And it's a journey that God has all of us on. And we appreciate you reaching out and helping others along the journey. I trust that discussion had plenty of nuggets there for men of all ages and any stages of the journey. If you're a young man, I pray that you can learn some things from some older men. You don't need to repeat their mistakes. And if you're an older man, regretting that you can't turn back the clock to know then what you know now, I encourage you to look around for a younger guy you can help and cheer on along his way. Now, this video is premiering on the night before Father's Day. So one more time, whether you're viewing this just before or a little after the holiday, I'll ask you to join me in giving to the Men's Ministries Father's Day offering. This is what finances Men's Ministries' efforts here in the Illinois district to produce things like this online forum, Young Men's Encounter, and so much more. And of course, nationwide and abroad. This past year, Men's Ministries has been able to assist in disaster relief, to help church planners, to produce resources like the updated version of our Men's Dominion Bible Study. I'll ask you, please bless a ministry that blesses our men. God is using it to accomplish great things in these last days. And before I sign off, I want to extend much thanks to all those who contributed their time and expertise to this online forum. Some were in front of the camera and some behind. We're grateful for all of your contributions. And particularly to my in-house video editing team. Wesley and Caleb Roady have spent many hours on this project, willingly laboring for nothing but room and board in exchange. Thanks, guys. You're the best. Men, if these videos have been a help to you, please share them with somebody else so they can be blessed as well. So long for now.